and registration for the others available. So today's topic is use commanding strategies to dominate the competition. I'll give you a quick backdrop. I teach business strategy for CUNY. Actually taught it at China this past summer from an entrepreneurial perspective. The reason we picked this up is for some reason, and there's a major professor at Columbia who's taken this approach. Many people think you cannot anymore create sustainable competitive advantages. And actually, said you can't. It's all tactical. We don't agree. It's hard work. And so if you want to do the hard work, you can do it. And a couple of years ago, as we went through this with our clients, we realized that these strategies have in common beyond to make them sustainable is that, thank you, I'll fix the voice better this way. I hope that helps. Is that you have to have a focus on being commanding of your industry and recognizing what your competition does, and that's something I think sometimes we miss. We get so internally focused we lose it. So that's why we put this together and decided to call it a commanding strategy, hence the name Commanding Strategies. So I'm going to go through an agenda with you of what we're going to cover in the next hour. Purpose isn't strategy. Today's phrase for many of the business consultants is, what's your purpose? Well, purpose is much bigger than strategy, and I want to just kind of take the file and bring us down. Then I'm going to talk to what is strategy. We like to view it as a systematic means to an end. What is a commanding strategy? And our whole philosophy is that it gives you an asymmetric, it means one side over the other, sustainable competitive advantage over your competition for long-term growth. And so we'll focus on that. As Archimedes said, give me a lever and I'll move the world. And that's what we're trying to do, is give you the levers that you can use to rule the world, especially when you dominate your competition, make more money, have less stress. That's what it's really all about. So let's talk about the concept of what is purpose. Purpose is why we kind of live in life, and many of us have broken that down into many different issues: vision, mission, goals, objectives, and values. One of the things that I want to focus on is what's the difference. This is a really important part because as I teach it, I often refer some of my students to different books that define things differently. There really is a better definition for everything, and I want to focus in on it. A vision is the impact you're going to have on the world. It's the headline that you see 5 years from now in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. It's what you're going to do that's different. When John F. Kennedy in 1961 said we're going to send a man to the moon and bring him up safely within a decade, that was a vision. Okay? When Bill Gates said we're going to put a computer on every desktop, it's a vision. It's where you see the world going to be years from now. It's the impact you're going to have. When you think of someone like Starbucks, and you understand what he was trying to say when he said what we want to do is have a third place, it's an example again of a vision. The mission is much more personal. It's what drives people every day to get up in the morning, why we go to work every day to do our job as part of that vision. How do we accomplish it? So if I'm at Starbucks, what I'm really focusing in on is providing customers with a great coffee experience. And everyone from the barista to the person who buys the coffee beans to the people who design the shops, they're all working on doing that in their own different way so that it can eventually be the third place that everyone comes to. They're not in their office or at home for the day in terms of enjoying life. Within that, you're going to have several goals. Okay, these are the goals that you want to accomplish in the year. And the reason we save this presentation for now is for 2015, people are beginning to do this. What's our strategy, and where do we want to go from here? And the strategy consists of the goals and how we achieve those goals. So one may be we want to increase sales by 27%. That's a great goal. My Vistage group, as you all know, I work with Vistage International, which is CEOs between $5 and $500 million on average, some billion-dollar companies. They outperform standard CEOs by a ratio of almost 2 to 1. Last year, doing on average over 11.8%. My New York CEOs are up about 25%. So I push them a little harder, and they're great people because they want to do it and they're accomplishing it. But to do that, you have to ask the question, how do I increase it? And that consists, again, of sub-goals, or we'll call them objectives. How might I do that? I might increase the number of new customers I have by 10%. I might also increase the order size by 7%. I might also increase the amount of repeat business I'm getting from my clients by 10%. In other words, I'm viewing it in many different ways. Each of those is subjective. Why? And if you've sat in our program on accountability and how to drive accountability for success, you'll know that the key here is that each conversation focused on a specific objective. What did we do? How did we do it? What do we have to do better? Again, the focus is always continuous improvement. That's our philosophy, and that's what we do. To have a great strategy is wonderful, but it's only as good as the culture that you're going to have. And as you know, Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You don't have the right culture, you're not going to get the right strategy. So you have to really focus on what are the values, and you have to really work on them very in depth. And it's very interesting because most CEOs I meet with tell us about the teams that I bring along, my students, my interns, my staff. We have a whole bunch of values. I can tell you what they are. Come here, let's walk on the wall and read them. And that's where they are, on the wall for people to read. They're not internalized. To have an effective culture, they have to be internalized value. So when Starbucks, when Schultz at Starbucks decided I want to create a company that's providing real value for people, what he did is he said, I want to make sure that everybody can have health care where it's grounded in the fact that his father didn't have health care and died at a young age. And so anybody over, I think it's 30 hours a week, not 40, gets health care. It's teamwork. It's working with each person. What does that mean? And again, value would break that out. Is proactive or reactive? Is it educational or just supportive? There's all kinds of components. As we talked about in the Evaluate to Win program and accountability, you have to really break these values down. So purpose involves these 5 different areas, each of which has to be drilled down to be effective, especially if you want a strategy that's effective. And if you plan your program for 2015, this is what you want to do. Actually, I just reminded we are doing a brand new workshop next Friday for those of you who are in the New York area addressing this. It's open to only teams of CEOs and the senior executive. At the end, I'll tell you a little bit more about it and where you can get some more information on it. It's complimentary to the New York people. It's a pilot of 2 different tools that we're showing people for how to plan it. Why? Because we want everybody there to have a commanding strategy in 2015 by working through all these issues. So let's define, again, what is a strategy. Strategy is the process of obtaining resources and mobilizing them to achieve the corporate purpose. Now notice what we're talking about. We're talking about resources and aligning them and mobilizing them to achieve the purpose. That's why you need to know what your vision and your mission are and figure out therefore what strategies will do that well. It involves 5 key elements. External analysis. What's the environment look like? So for example, I'm thinking of building at Dingle Dingle Company. I'm thinking of building new mobile devices that people can wear, wearable devices. So maybe it's Google Glass, maybe it's Apple Watch. And one of the things I know is that if I come up with a great technology to do it, it doesn't mean people are going to beat a path to my door because Google Glass is there. Apple is there. Nike is there. Many people are creating many of these things already. So the external analysis means I really need to look at my competition. I need to look at trends. Just because we can produce shale gas very inexpensively, shale oil for resources inexpensively, which is making the United States the biggest exporter right now of oil in the country, doesn't mean I'm going to get everybody on board, including the President of the United States, to make it possible for us to get involved at every different place. Many states still provide problems. So you have to look at the external analysis, and we'll talk about Porter's 5 forces in a minute to help you do that. The second is internal analysis, asking questions about yourself. What are you capable of doing? What are you doing well? What can you do better? What can't you do better? Differentiating. You have to make decisions. It's not easy. The key to being a leader is making tough calls. And you have to make them based on what you think is going to be the best scenario going forward. You then have to implement the system. You have to figure out what you're trying to do and implement it. So the execution is going to be critical. How do we do it? Many people, when they do it's called a management retreat. We don't believe in that. We call them strategic leadership advances. As they come up with a plan, they give everybody what they're supposed to do, and then they're on their own. Well, we think that doesn't work, as we all know, because people get distracted by other things. There's no one holding them accountable. There's no way of watching continuous improvement down the road. So what you need to do is build an implementation system where you can track it, where you can watch it, where you can provide accountability, you can provide help to be improved, and you help everyone continuously improve. And that means you're constantly evaluating it and using the feedback with that particular goal, the goal being continuous improvement. So let's focus just quickly on some of these external analysis. You're looking at what's changing in technology. 10 years ago, we didn't talk about mobile devices the way we do today. Take a look at this weekend. If you know, this past weekend, we had Black Friday, we had Cyber Monday, and yet most of the people, when they heard the Black Friday numbers, heard that 13%, according to Retail Federation, sales were down. But the fact is, on Cyber Monday, they were up because there's a switch in every company, from Target to Best Buy to Walmart. It's a switch from going to stores to working to buying certain things online. How that switch is going is the strategy that you have to work through. How do you put it together? Economics is changing. We had a number of countries countries doing very well in the 2000s, and then we had the 2008 recession that affected everybody in different ways in different countries. How it affects what you do, what you're working in, what's the economy going to be, etc. As we all look now at interest rates going up probably next year, what impact does that have on how you finance your company and what you do? If you're following the news, there's right now a bond deal that's going to be going out that involves tax inversion. And even though the president decided he had a policy to change it, company just decided in a different way of structuring the deal, slightly more expensive, but still saves a lot of money through tax inversion. And I think all of us will save money in time when Congress and the president both agree we have to change the way tax inversions work against Americans, and especially the taxpayer who picks up what corporate people aren't paying. Demographics, we also talk about the millennial generation. What does that mean about your workforce? How does it change? Globalization. All the outsourcing that's taking place is changing a difference in where we are. The virtual workforce has totally changed. How do you hold people accountable? How do you keep them aligned with your values? How do you keep them aligned with strategic performance, meaning those things they do that fit what you're doing? It's really incredible to be able to do both outsourcing and using virtual workforces very effectively. I can give you an example. Everyone in my office, whenever I run into really lousy customer service, I do it nice and loud and kind of signal people, listen into this terrible conversation. I'm working with somebody and I'm saying I've had a major problem and I would like to speak to a supervisor. Can't find a supervisor. Fine. Give me the name of the president. I'd like to send a letter to the president. I don't know the name of my president. Okay. Do you know the name of the president of the United States? Wasn't sure of it. I said, excuse me, what country are you in? Not America. Okay. This is a giant company that's relying on people who can't figure out who the name of the company is, can't figure out who the supervisor is, don't know the name of the president, and can't give me a contact to call. Okay. And now you know this as well as the staff around me. They know who the company is. I'm not telling that. It's that kind of quality control about virtual workforces, what they do and how they do it, and about outsourcing that's critical. And then there are cultural shifts. There's shifts in terms of the cultures in America. There's shifts in terms of the cultures around the world. That has to deal with politics, etc. Just yesterday, one of the things I make sure that my students do is we talk about news every single day. So given what's happening between Russia and the United States and the sanctions, Putin's made a decision to take a pipeline that was going to provide a lot of energy to, in this case, gas and oil to Europe, and because of the fear of sanctions, he's moving it to Turkey. What change does that do? Well, that changes probably construction patterns in the country. So if you were a contractor there, you might find out you have a new advantage because instead of going kind of west and north, you might be working south. So it changes what you're doing. You need to look at all these things and stay on top of it, and that's someone's job. And if they're not doing that job well, they're not contributing to the pattern. For those of you familiar with Michael Porter over at Harvard, one of the gurus in this area, I want to again share with you the structure he's done as a teacher. I'm a big believer in tools and structures, and he's focusing on what's called the 5 forces. If you're in a company and you need to be able to produce something, what do? Well, you're in the middle there. So you're General Motors, and you produce cars. Got a lot of competition. 50 years ago, it might have been only Americans. Today, it isn't. So you're constantly taking a look at what's happening. Well, first of all, what you want to do is worry about your rivals. What's Ford? What's Chrysler? What's Toyota? What are all these companies doing? You're also being affected to the left of the bargaining power of the suppliers. Okay, if you are, as most of them have, if you are a captive of one or two suppliers of your products, like windshield wipers, then the answer is if they, for whatever reasons, want to increase the cost of the windshield wiper year after year, you're going to pay for it because you can't easily switch without spending a lot of money on the devices that are driving it. You have the bargaining power of buyers. Again, from a marketing point of view, these companies have made a tragic mistake. They've, instead of focusing on value in many cases, what they're focusing on is cost savings, leasing options, how they're cheaper, give backs, etc. Critical thing that hurt the automobile industry in the last several years. So buyers today have a lot more power because what's happened is by shifting the reason people buy, which is value, to the reason they buy to save money, you put power in the buyer to find ways of getting prices lower. Every day it gets lower, it makes your existing product more expensive for them, and therefore you've lost more bargaining power. You would also focus on new entrants. Who's coming out there? So one of the big issues, as you were probably aware, is Tesla. Tesla Motors is creating cars. It's a different area. It's a new entrant. Okay, in the sense it's also a threat of a substitute product at the bottom. But let's focus on them as just a new entrant. They're offering an electric car that's more expensive. They're planning on coming out with a cheaper one under $40,000. So what's happening? They sell it directly because electric is different than everything else. So again, how do companies handle it? They lobby states, and states have deals that say you can only buy a car through an authorized dealer. And since Tesla's not selling to dealers, Tesla's actually being stopped in many states. Is that good competition? It's your decision to make. Is that right in terms of where a country should be moving? It's, again, you have to think that through. But that's an example of how a company builds its strategy. As long as you don't want to have dealer network, you're not going to be able to sell in this state, which gives us a competitive advantage over you. And finally, there's this threat of substitute products or services. Let's take a completely different example. Take an example of transportation. So once upon a time, if you lived between, I believe it's Dallas and rather Austin and Dallas, and you wanted to travel, you would travel by car or you would use Greyhound. Southwest Airlines decided, you know something, this is short. We can use two airports that are outside the main airport, saving us a lot of money in terms of gate fees and everything like that, and we can offer that deal for about $29. Bus costs $39. Now you've got a competitive advantage. Plus, if the fact is it takes an hour and a half, 2 hours by bus, and it takes you 30 minutes to fly, you have another advantage. So in looking at airlines, you have to look at or car companies or buses. You shouldn't be looking at a particular segment of the industry, but the new entrant substitute product could be something totally different and coming out of a different part of the industry. Last example, I used to work with a simulation for my students on dishware. So in the old days, let's go back 50 to 100 years ago, people might have gone home for lunch and they eat on china. Today, if you ask most people how they eat on paper, on plastic, things like that. Just how they're having their lunch. They're not coming home to China. Total new product changes the industry. That's what you need to look at as you're making your strategy. How's the world changing? Then, understanding that, you have to say, well, what are our strengths? Are we good at what we're doing in terms of where we're going? So, for example, when you look at a company like Nike, they focus on performance apparel. And what they've done is they've decided to extend that apparel part of it, and now they're extending it to providing mobile devices as part of the wearables, so that what you can do is you have your Fitbit, and then you can check how you're doing in your fitness, and it becomes an electronic thing you can wear. Their strength, therefore, is the market, people who might want to buy this stuff, and their perception that this is performance related. Apple's about to enter with the watch next year. We don't have all the information on what it's going to be, but we know the following. Their strength is not about performance related. It's about electronics. It's about mobile devices. It's making it simple. It's making it sexy. It's making it catchy. So they're coming in with two completely different strengths. Can they therefore compete if they wanted to against one another? To some extent they could, because they're going to be offering different propositions. Just like Walmart and Nordstrom offer two different value propositions when they sell similar products, but in category, but not in terms of quality. What are your weaknesses? Weaknesses is a real interesting issue. Paul Buckingham makes the point that many companies and people feel if you find your weakness, what you need to do is fix it and turn it into at least not a weakness or a strength. That's what many people believe. But Bo says, you know something, sometimes acknowledge it's a weakness and focus on your strength. So you won't compete in a certain area because you can't get access. So Tesla can't get into certain states. It's a weakness because it doesn't have a dealer network, but it can be stronger in other states. And that's just what it'll do. It'll come up with new innovations. It's got a brand new factory for batteries that's going to be doing in Nevada. They got a really good deal on. It's going to allow them to produce it. And they'll probably now excel in battery manufacturers, which will obviously help them have an advantage over car companies that maybe aren't focusing on that. So what you finally want to do is ask the question, if I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses, can I then take advantage of the opportunities? Again, by focusing on that external environment, you see all the changes that take place, and you know, therefore, what are the changes that need to take place and how to handle them in terms of opportunities and threats and address them. And then you can make the decision, is it better by strengthening, eliminating, or reducing the weakness, or should I be focusing on strength and new strengths? Technology changes a lot, and we have to change with it. So what you're doing, ultimately, is creating a differentiating decision. You're asking the question, what am I able to do best, based on the external and internal analysis. Generally, when we focus on strategy, are the three decisions people are going to make. First one is to be a low-cost provider. Walmart's a great example of that. Now, understand, everyone, that Walmart is not the cheapest producer, is a supplier, rather, of products on a retail basis. If you go to our jobs, you go to Family Dollar, Dollar General, companies like that, they can actually sell a similar product in that category cheaper than Walmart. Why? Because sometimes they'll take odd lots, meaning Colgate has come up with a brand new version of its toothpaste. So the old version, okay, is going to be now discounted. They get it at a discount and they sell it. Walmart doesn't sell that. They want to sell first-rate things. So they're buying in volume the current thing. So they'll have the current Colgate and they'll have it at a cheaper rate, at price maybe, because of the volume and the way they buy it. But you'll get it at Family Dollar, the older version, meaning the one you used last week before the new one got announced, and you'll get a discount on it. The second option is product service differentiation. Apple's a classic example of it. You could buy any kind of computer you wanted to. Up to 10 years ago, that was going to either be white or black because they were all part of the Wintel network, okay? Intel chips, Windows operating system, and key suppliers like Compaq and HP and initially IBM. They differentiated the look, the feel, the operating system, how they sold it, who they were selling it to, and therefore could charge a premium. And despite the fact that right now they're offering mobile phones at a cheaper, at a more expensive price than most other companies do. They're differentiating it by the quality and the care. And again, the image, the brand image they have is clearly different than HTC, argument's sake, out of China. And what you might also want to do is a third option, if you're not going for the mass market, which is 1 and 2, focus on a niche. Just what do I do in this small area that's going to be different and focused? So, for example, Tesla does not compete with Ford or Chrysler for gas cars. It's a niche. It's only electric. So it's competing with the Leaf by Nissan. It's competing with Toyota's Prius, with other such companies. So it's a very small market, and they made a decision how to do it. So you can get 2 Leafs. They used to joke you can get 2 Leafs for a Prius, and you can get 3 Leafs for 1 Tesla, or maybe even more. But the fact is, the Tesla car is very different than the Leaf in many, many ways, and therefore you might want to consider it. The second part is you might want to focus on something that's going to harness your organization's energies and really make that your differentiating product. You could do that within a niche that's costed, or it could be done within a differentiation. So Zappos, for example, has a coordinated plan to harness its energies by focusing on high-level quality customer service. They're number one just about in that. They've owned it for several years as they built it out. They've even have built the story, as you're probably all aware. And when people go to Zappos to work, they get to work for 2 weeks, and then they get offered money. It's up to, I think, $2,000 right now to leave the job and go somewhere else if they want to leave, because they want to make sure these people are super dedicated to their job, and they'll take anything that it takes to do it. And that's really the quality of what it is. A great story on that I'll just share with you. One day, the head of Zappos is at a dinner meeting in a completely other city with a number of people. It's very late at night. It's about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and they want to get something to eat. And they're thinking, hey, let's see if we can get pizza. Turns out the hotel they're in doesn't have anything that's that late at night. And so one of the people jokes and says, we always say you can call Zappos, so why don't we call Zappos and see if they can get us pizza? And one of the other guys said, well, wait a minute, we're not where their headquarters are in Nevada. It doesn't make any sense. He said, well, they say they can do anything. Let's find out. So, and that's exactly what the CEO says do. So they make a phone call and they say, hi, we'd like to order some pizza. Maybe you can help us. Woman on the phone answers, excuse me, with Zappos, we sell shoes and other things. We do pizza. Yeah, but I'm told you have great customer service and help everybody. Okay, hold 1 minute, please. Where are you again? Okay, thank you. Comes back on a minute later. Okay, I found 3 pizza places that are open late at night in your area. Here are their names and their numbers. You can call them directly. Great story. It's the kind of stories that drive the brand value for companies and why people therefore continue to excel at what they do. So as I said, one is making the decision. What are we going to specialize in? The second part is implementing it. Okay, how do I actually build a program to do it? What's my strategy? How am I recruiting people, for example? Am I recruiting the best people, or am I recruiting average people? Do I take talent and make it a big issue? Do I make it a small issue? When I was in high school, I worked for a while in a file room of a large insurance company, and the turnover was astronomical. I mean, I don't think people lasted more than a month on average. I did. And at one point, I turned to someone and said, if you maybe change the way we structure who you're hiring and what you're paying them, they would stay longer. And someone in HR said, that's a great idea. Thank you. But let me share something with you. You guys are a dime a dozen. You're not worth it. We're not looking for highly qualified people to do filing. We just want young kids who can come in. We don't care if we train you for 2 hours and lose you in a month. Whether they're right or wrong, because remember, files get misfiled, and that may come out of that kind of philosophy. That's the point you have to make a decision. How you implement your talent is going to make a difference. What are the systems? What are the policies that you're going to use? Everything needs to have a model. So if you're in sales, lead generation, qualifying them, making a presentation, following it up, delivering on the promise, doing follow-up to get referrals could be part of your model, but it doesn't have to be. Too many sales organizations we work with don't have that kind of systematic process to do it. And what's your organizational model? How are you building your organizational chart? Are you building one that's all internal, which is traditional, or are you building one that's doing more of a virtual workforce where maybe your workers work out of homes or out of places, or you're outsourcing, or whatever the case may be? You need to make that decision. What's interesting is, and maybe at some other point I'll bring this up, there are all kinds of new organizational models. There's the functional, the small business one. There's the matrix model, which many companies today do, their Fortune 500, and there's something we call the brand new model no one's discussing, which is called the network model. It's what Al-Qaeda is using and companies like that, Taliban and things like that. And until we understand that model, we're not going to succeed at the level we need to be able to harness it. And finally, once you've got a model, is it working? Is it working the way you want it? How do we change what we do? So one of the ways of measuring is KPIs, key performance indicators, are related to your finance, okay? But that's not the only thing, because the numbers don't tell you why people buy. And so you want to be focused on customer-focused KPIs. So one of the things I look at are repeat rates in buying, okay? So I'm looking, do I have a number of people buying? Let me give you an example. A lot of companies do webinars. And one of the things they look at is how many people register. I ask, do you ever look at how many people actually get on the phone? Get on the web. Well, not a whole lot of people. We run about 50%. I said, okay, and how many people stay to the end? Gee, I don't know. I don't look at that. Here's an example. We're doing our program. 75% of the people who registered for today's program are here, And you'll probably all stay almost till the very end because we run 90% hold rate because the content is that good. That's how our KPI that I use to measure the quality of our programs, and we do that with all of our Better Way workshops, which is what I hope you'll join us in the future to see them to really appreciate it. One of the ways that I help people understand how they can implement the program and evaluate it is to use something we call the open systems model. Essentially, it's very simple. Running the organization is always one or more managers. We like to think of it as two roles. The CEO's focus is the external environment. The internal is the COO or the president. The system consists of inputs, which are the resources, the capital, the people, all the things you bring into the company to make things happen. Then the things that happen, the throughputs of the processes, maybe you're manufacturing a car. I teach this in school, and I say what we do in a school is we take high school graduates and we turn them into college graduates. That's our 4-year program. Those are the throughputs. What are the inputs? It's teachers, it's money, it's space, it's time, it's books, all that kind of stuff. And then you produce outputs, but we don't think that's a good enough measure. There are two outputs. The first one is what we call immediate outcomes. So we produce in schools graduates, but that's not our goal. Our goal is really to have them gainfully employed and happy and productive in life. That's the long-term output that we're looking for because that determines the feedback. Great schools who produce highly satisfied employees in other companies with great compensation become great alumni, and they provide the feedback you want, not just referrals, but money. So understanding all the elements is what's key to your success. So that brings us to the point of what we call a commanding strategy. All of that was a strategy. What is the commanding strategy? It's sustainable. How do you keep it sustainable? Remember, if I drop my price and you want to compete with me, then you can do that by just dropping your price, and now we're in competition. Now, unless you've built a structure that allows you to offer it at the same price I do, you're going to lose out. And that's exactly what happened to Kmart in the 1990s when they thought, well, we'll just drop our prices and match Walmart's, except for the fact that their cost of goods was higher, and therefore they lost money, went into bankruptcy. So the key is when you're building your company is to understand your competition and understand what are their weaknesses. Okay, so in a sense, Walmart's strength was knowing that Kmart had a higher cost structure. One of the key differences was Kmart focused on stores. Whereas Walmart focused on networks, the community, distribution center, menu stores. That changed its entire model. That gives you what we call an asymmetric, sustainable, competitive advantage, or a commanding strategy. But to do it requires trade-offs. And that's the hard part, and that's what you need to do before you launch such a strategy, is have a strategic leadership advance where you're figuring out how do we advance, getting all your leaders to agree. It's what we're going to do this a week from Friday in the commanding strategy, what we call workshop practicum, where one CEO can bring an executive and go through this basic process of applying everything I'm teaching you today as an opportunity to see what it's like. And if you're interested, send me an email and we'll send you a flyer on it. It's a great way to learn how to apply this stuff and to use it, and that's what you can do. And that's what we're going to do this. So let me go through some commanding strategies so you really understand what's behind it. You all can recognize these companies. These are just some examples of the kind of companies that do what we're talking about. Let's take TD Bank. So TD Bank didn't exist many years ago in the version there are. They used to be Commerce Bank. TD America, which is a Canadian company, bought them, and they rebranded them in terms of using the clean color as America's most convenient bank. So what was the key? They began to offer retail services, which is their specialty, 7 days a week, roughly 12 hours a day on weekdays, meaning 7:30 in the morning to, it used to be 8, now it's 7:30. It's now fewer hours, generally 11 hours now every day. And then on weekends, they're open on Saturdays and Sundays. Why? Are they focusing on the big corporate America who doesn't work on Saturdays and Sundays? No. Their target market's clearly smaller, mid-sized businesses who will take advantage of it, and individuals. So when they first came out and I started discussing it with the class, I said to them, so how do they stay in business? Because in New York City, for those of you in New York, you know what I'm talking about, on many corners, you can have 4 banks. It's an amazing process, okay? 4 different banks on 4 different corners. So if one does X, the others can also copy X, right? Wrong. That's what makes it a commanding strategy. Building on others' weaknesses gives you a strength. So it turns out every other bank is focused on providing multiple services. So take a company like Chase or Citibank, they offer a large variety of services. To have people be able to provide the services means you need to hire people who are a little better educated, possibly, but definitely go through different training and evaluation to be able to discuss all the services. If all I'm going to do is a handful of services with only a very small handful of options, I'm mostly focusing on just physically being available, which, by the way, doesn't cost a whole lot of money since I've already got the Sunday space I'm paying for. It's just people and utilities. Um, then it allows me to do that. So recognizing that if, for example, Chase or Citibank suddenly said, oh, we're going to open Saturdays and Sundays too, it would cost them an enormous amount more money without necessarily getting a return because their target market's different, their cost structure is different, and therefore it would make it very difficult for them to do. So they made a trade-off. They said, people, you know something? We can compete against these people by being more convenient. People will come to us, but you know what? They make it slightly lower interest rates because that's how we're going to pay for it. But that's okay. These people aren't looking to make as much money necessarily in sweep accounts and things like that. And we'll offer fewer services, but if they do some business on a Saturday or Sunday and they have a check and they want to use it, they can cash that check and do it. That was their advantage, and they took New York by storm, and they really became New York's most convenient bank. And the problem in part is for them is to maintain that kind of integrity of what they're doing. They're having some weaknesses right there now, but I think they can do it. Walmart's another example. Walmart isn't focusing on stores like Kmart. They're focused on the network. It's the combination of things that are going to make a difference for them. So they looked at logistics as a distribution center in the neighborhood. So they took one distribution center. Let's build a really great distribution system from there that could supply all of the Walmarts. And the plan was always to say, we'll have 4, 5, 6, 7 around there. So instead of worrying about getting to a specific center, it's how do we get it to the distribution center to make it something that we can give people and do that. That allowed them to say, fine, if I'm going to buy in higher volume, I can put more pressure on the supplier. And understanding their ability to do that. That's what they did. So they focused on working with, it's called the opportunity loop, working with suppliers to say, we'll buy high volume, but I need a better cost. And here's the key part. They didn't take the cost and put it in their pocket as profit. They pass it on as augmented savings to customers. It's called the opportunity loop, and you can read Wall Smart. It's a book that focuses on it and shows you how they take that nickel saving and offer it at 8, 9 cents discount to the customer, which increases their volume enough to make up for even more and allows them to continue the cycle over again. What's the value of the trade-off? It lets them set the standards for low-cost discounting, and they've done a great job. So they're offering low prices, the customer gets great products, but they're not giving great customer service, and they recognize that. So if you're looking for great customer service, you're looking for high-priced products, this is not the place to go. That might be Nordstrom. They're making that decision. It's a trade-off. Zappos, again, the example. Problem here is people want to buy products. If I want to buy a TV, I can look at it, I can see it, I can shop in a Best Buy and then decide I'm going to buy it off Amazon or something, but I'm not really wearing it like clothing. And so if I want to do that, I might want to see if it really fits me, if I really like it, if it's comfortable. Therefore, many people didn't buy online. So Zappos is one of those many companies, but they pushed the line telling people they do it. I said, we'll do is we'll let you buy it, and then you can send it back to us. Maybe you pay for it, maybe you don't. Zappos offered it for free, and then made that their brand image. What's the value of that? It then created a system where people could say, well, I'll buy 10 different shoes, different color, different styles, try them all out, see what they look like, and return 8 or 9 of them. And that's exactly what they did, and that's how they grew very effectively. And then, as I said, they now have a culture of customer service that no one has as powerful as they do. They've created the image through excellent stories, and one I gave you is a great example. They also provide facility tours. They make it fun. They've done everything they can to make people identify with the people who provide the service, who can therefore talk about what they're doing, and the shoe's almost kind of like just why they came in. So it's providing great service, but it's not necessarily the lowest cost provider. You can probably find most of the shoes at a slightly lower price than another company, but the answer is, would you have such good experience? It's the experience that counts. Commanding strategies generally are experiential. They relate to the experience. Dell is an example. Now I'm talking about the old Dell. I'm not talking about the current Dell which many of you are familiar with as being now a private company, though they may resume it. How did it start? It's a guy, Michael Dell, in his college dorm decides to get into business. And he said, how do I do this? I have to do something different. Well, I can offer people products that are custom made because people aren't really doing that. Right now they have to buy off the shelf a few types. I can smart assembly it. But the problem with how do I do that? Because financially I'm just a kid. How do I get the money? I know. I'll charge e-commerce. People pay me up front. I therefore use the customer's payments as a way for me to take my company and grow it. Note the difference. If I'm an HP, Hewlett Packard, or an IBM or any of the other companies right then, what are they doing? They're paying for their products in usually 30, 60, 90 days. They're then manufacturing them, selling them out to the distributor who puts them out to retailers who then pay 60, 90 days after that. So they're constantly in a flow trying to catch the money later on, and therefore they have to borrow money and have resources to be able to pay for it, all of which Dell solves because Dell has customers paying up front. That saving on cash flow allows them to offer lower discounts. So between doing it in a dorm and having cash pay for it, they had an advantage that other people didn't, and a competitive advantage for many, many years in commanding strategy. Apple is a great example of what we call an ecosystem, where they put all the pieces together very effectively as opposed to systems that aren't there. But to focus on that, I call it holistic design beats system integration. What do we mean by that? Take a look very carefully. What Apple does is a commanding user experience. It's designing all the ecosystem that provides all the pieces you want. iMacs, iTunes, iCloud, iPhones, iPad, all the things that come together. It's not asking you to integrate anything. So I'm not buying product A and putting in Dropbox and using some other service for the cloud, et cetera, et cetera. So they began initially, and that's their key to fame, is working with some of the most demanding computer users, the graphic designers, the IT people, setting the standards for great customer service. And it's one of the reasons their stores have the highest sales per square foot of any retail store that's out there. It's amazing, and it's wonderful. And if you haven't been in the store, take your kids out and have a tour of what quality is all about. So they made a difference. The trade-off is we're going to offer a unique product line. We will not sell high volume maybe as other people do. At least that was the initial part. But we're going to create a culture that's really great, and people will get it, and then users will want to come back to us over and over again. So there's not much less churning than there is with any other company. If I'm using an HTC or a Sanyo or a Panasonic or a Samsung phone, moving from one phone to another, it's probably very little loyalty to the company. Car companies have that all the time. Okay, so I bought the car because I got great leasing price. Car now is being brought in. Who gives me the best leasing price right now? That's my decision factor. Here it's different. I'm buying from a company that stands behind it in a way, and therefore buying part of the culture, being part of the product, so it makes it valuable to me. I use Starbucks already as an example. Their vision was to have a third place where people could relax besides home and the office, and a story about it. So you don't buy, give me a big or a large coffee, you're buying a venti. It's an entire story, a language, people having to learn it. People willing to stand on line outside to do it. There's a 34th Street, 33rd Street and Fifth Avenue store. That's by 8:30 in the morning. It's got people standing outside the store trying to get getting on the line because you're at the back of the line to get coffee. It's phenomenal. They didn't build a brand around cheap prices or just here's coffee. It's an affordable indulgence. It's making it something people want against the customer experience. So it costs more to provide that experience, to do that branding, and they can charge more. But if they can't match the value, which is a loyalty and a dedication to it, then it becomes for them a commanding strategy. So even with McCoffee and Dunkin' Donuts and everything taking people away, Starbucks is growing faster than any of them. Enterprise Rent-A-Car, many of you have heard of, may not know, it's the #1 largest rent-a-car company out there. Many years as I grew up, Hertz was, and they used to be #2, and they would advertise we're #2, but we try harder. Well, both of those cars have dropped way below Enterprise. Enterprise took a completely different approach. Instead of focusing on the traveler, who is a business person in the case of Hertz, or maybe just a family traveler in case of, a Budget National, who became part of the Avis empire. What they did is they focused on how do we help people who really need a car And what they discovered is people who didn't need a car, people who may have been in an accident and needed repaired. And so insurance companies become their natural ally, completely different approach. So insurance companies want to reimburse. They get a package deal from Enterprise. They therefore refer Enterprise. And so the customer saves, Enterprise saves, again, a win-win situation. It also made other changes. It doesn't rent the car, lease the car. What it does actually is buy the car, and it takes care of them a little longer and a little better, so they become owner-operated cars in a sense. And then what it does is it sells those cars to third markets, making more money because, especially during the recession, used cars have great value in many different countries. It also differentiated its service very clearly. It said if you're going to have a car accident and you need to have a car repaired and you're going to be without a car for a while, and then it says, okay, go grab a cab to come to us, that costs money. But if we say we pick you up, then it doesn't cost money, and that differentiates you right away. And that's exactly what they did. And so the result is they focus on picking you up, which also meant they don't need to have highly desirable real estate in certain places, like an airport. If you ever notice, Hertz might be right there at the airport, but national budget enterprise companies like that, who are trying to save you money, are a little bit distant off the beaten track. You have to take a shuttle to get there for 10 minutes. So they set a standard for service, and they allowed it to become the industry leader. It is by far the industry leader right now. Many of you have heard of a whole new industry started by Zipcar, which is renting cars by the hour. And what it did is it decided, something, we're going to compete against rental cars, but differentiate ourselves. In our case, what happens is you're not going to buy it by the day or by the week. What you're doing is you're able to buy it by the hour, appealing to a completely different audience, the audience being urban people, being students who just need it for a couple of hours for what they're doing. So it focuses on technology in the cars. Because people, they become members and they can use it, and they can literally lease it offline, rent it offline, and using codes get into the car. So they don't have to have big parking lots and big real estate. These things are parked very often in schools and in churches and temples and outside and streets and stuff like that. Totally different approach. It also focused on small cars, not larger cars, because again, it's not renting to CEOs who are in a different city and traveling around to 2-3 plants. It's focusing on getting on that person who's using for a couple of hours, maybe to carry something. Since then, it's been copied by many companies. Hertz connecting one of them. They're all trying to compete. But Zipcar maintains its lead because it has a commanding strategy. It's combined all of these advantages in a way these companies haven't done. Finally, as I mentioned, I teach Baruch at CUNY, and what I do is I give them a structure to do it. I say, come up with a business that would show how you'd have a commanding strategy. In a world of burgers, it's really hard to differentiate how you can offer a burger company that might be different. And one team came up with it. They call it Baruch Burgers. And the question is, how does they build a commanding strategy? And the answer was, they focused on something that other people couldn't do. One, they specialized in vegetarian products, so they're always healthy. Second, they create charge accounts and link them to school IDs. And then what they do is they do next break delivery service. So when you place the order, you could say, "Hi, I'm finishing at 12 o'clock. Could I meet you at the entrance of the building, and you deliver it to me at 12:15, giving you half an hour still to you." That kind of competitiveness gives them a built-in business. They know exactly when the peaks are going to be, etc. And so after they've done all of this, I said, "Where's your growth?" And they said, "Absolutely, we got it. It's called University Burgers." So if you ever found a University Burger near you, it was invented by my students. So now that we've gotten a really good sample of a lot of companies that have built dominating strategies, which we call competitive strategies. And now it's time for you to say, my God, in 2015, I want to make more money more easily and be more successful. We want to do it. What do you do? So let's go through it. First, it's about leadership. It's why I work with Vistage. I work with top leaders who are driving their companies, driving themselves, and enjoying life to some extent a little more, and they achieve their goals quicker. So you have to help the company identify what's the purpose. Why are you doing what you're doing? How do you do it? And what are you doing? Your strategy. But it's the why, the purpose that's going to motivate people. It's going to engage people. That's what you want to do. Second, you need to communicate it to inspire people. Remember, we're part of the Presentation Excellence Group. We spend over 25, 30 years teaching people how to do winning presentations. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. And you're saying it at the right time and the place, which is part of that how. So you're inspiring people. You're empowering people. You're mobilizing a team. That's the goal in communication.
And so what you need to do is to get leaders who can do that in your company to take you to a commanding strategy. Some of the qualities of these kinds of people, one is they're smart. And I mean just intellectually, I mean they have an informational IQ. They're looking for information. Remember I told you in the beginning, you need to have external and internal awareness and the analysis of what's happening inside and outside. So that's part of the intelligence that you have to do. And finally, when they take a educated guess by doing all the homework and they come up with a hypothesis that this will really work for us and they want to do it, they have to have the courage of the convictions. You know, people who created great companies and great innovations, everything from Colonel Sanders with Kentucky Fried Chicken to Edison, etc., Ford, you name it, Tesla now with cars, they've had the courage of the convictions even in bad times to continue. And that's easier if you follow the advice we gave you of having an accountability system built in, actually building a new platform for that for some people, that allows them to manage the accountability by forcing conversations on what did I do, how do I do it better, and how do I get the help and support to need it. With that kind of leadership and building the kind of systems we've given you to use today, you can do it. So what do? First, analyze your business. What's externally happening? What's internally? Then decide what makes your company special. Why should anyone work with you? And if you don't have it, hi, we're no worse than anyone else. It was a great phrase somebody once said. We're no worse than anyone else. Well, that's not a reason to use your service, is it? So what makes you special? What's unique about your product or service? What makes it worth more money? Why would the certain clients that you want to have, the more profitable clients, buy it from you? That's the pre-issue. What systems would you use to be if you want to be the low-cost provider or the high-cost provider? So, for example, Apple with the iPhone was looking at a whole new way of creating the screen, a new technology instead of the kind of glass plastic they use right now. And they were looking at a new crystal system. We'll see what happens on that. And then do you have a unique niche, okay, like Zappos with customer service? What are you doing again that makes your company special, around which I can launch my commanding strategy? Are your strategies giving you an asymmetric competitive advantage? In other words, is it something that would be really difficult for other companies to quickly build up and copy? That's the key. You need to know their weaknesses. You need to know your strength. If so, you've got the idea of an effort commanding strategy. What you can do is you can implement it. You then evaluate it regularly, and you use the command strategy for long-term sustainable growth, which really is what you want to do, because that frees you up as a person to do other things, including grow your company in new ways and grow your own life in new ways. So I want to thank you for joining this presentation, because now you're ready to go dominate the competition. And with that, I want to thank you. You have my email over here and your phone number. I want to remind you that if you're in New York and you really want to work through a workshop on this, send me an email and I'll send you the flyer about the program we're doing next Friday, rather, from 8:30 to 12. It's going to be fantastic. It's Commanding Strategies' first workshop that we're doing here in New York on this technology. I also want to invite you again to the upcoming webinars. December 10th, next Wednesday, how to lead the innovative organization, unleash people's creativity. It's a great topic. It's urgent that people understand it, and so we welcome you to come and listen. And then our last one is, now that you've learned after 11 weeks a lot of good stuff to how to brand your company, grow your company, be innovative, join us for cultivating your next-gen leadership. What is it you need to do to make them effective? And with that, I want to wish you a successful day and a successful week, and look forward to seeing you next